Well, indeed, very encouraging developments there, especially for the people who normally are off-grid. And to stay on that note and continue the discussion about matters solar, especially with developments such as this, and in other parts, of the country, noting that that will be just around central Kenya. To begin with, we have in studio Mr. Guy Lawrence. He is the CEO of Solar Sanctuary East Africa, an organization that has been at the forefront of development in solar energy in this region. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so first off, encouraging developments, right there. The fact that we are now seeing an almost evolution in consumer electronics, targeting people who only have access to solar energy. What do you think this means for those households that will be able to access this product?
I think one of the reasons why solar has been so successful and why it's predicted to be sort of one of the major growth sectors in the power generation business is it's so scalable. You know, you can build a very large solar plant providing power to the national grid, and you can provide small solar lights providing power to sort of rural communities. And I think that combination makes solar a sort of very affordable solution, not only for Wananchi, not for the rural areas, but also for inner city and for government.
Yeah. Let's talk about it, but at a larger scale. The fact that solar continues to be one area where there has been relatively little penetration, about 14–15% right across Africa, depending on who you ask. And the fact that there are opportunities to exploit this, even at national levels, to be able to come up with mainstream energy. Where do you think the gaps are currently?
So, I mean, the gap is not in the technology.
Yes.
The technology is there. It's a mature technology. It's been proven, you know, China, US, Europe, you know, they've adopted solar on a large scale.
Yeah.
So the gap is not the technology. The gap is not affordability now. Solar has continued to come down in price. And we're seeing it reach grid parity in a lot of emerging markets now. I think if we focus on Kenya more so, you know, there's been a feed-in tariff in place for 4 years or so. At the beginning of when the feed-in tariff came out, it wasn't commercially viable. It is starting to become viable now. So really, it's just a price point question, and whether the relevant authority has got the processes and policy in place.
There has been the suggestions that the way we've created those tariffs has been the issue, the fact that rather than prescribing, we should be more involved in setting up things like auctions, which then will enable people be able to say that at this price we can match what you want or not. Sort of like what they do with government bonds and bills and that sort of thing. Do you think this should be the case?
I think auctions, I think you're right. I think auctions have a very good part to play in helping create lower power for consumers and also for Kenya to be more competitive. Not only internally within businesses, but you know, if we want to compete in the manufacturing sector with Egypt and South Africa, we have to get lower power. And creating a sort of a very efficient auction system for something like solar or wind power, you know, is one way of doing that, where you will drive the cost down and you will make it more efficient and more affordable. So yes, on the broader scale, yes, it is a good mechanism to move forward. There's obviously a lot of different things to think about.
How will this work so that we can just break it down? Because a lot of the time we assume that government has the answers. Sometimes they literally have no idea. So if we were to go that way, what would be the first thing that we would need to get right?
Sure. So I think that in Kenya we're very lucky. I mean, the ministry, Kenya Power ERC, even right to the top. You know, power is a very key part of the country, and you know we've got a very good ministry pushing this. In the way the auction will move forward, private or companies will be able to submit a proposal to build a solar plant in a specific area of the country with a set tariff that they expect to be paid by Kenya Power. What this means for government is government can look at areas around the country where there's a lack of power or there needs to be sort of further upgrade or power generation, and they can choose which plants at what tariff they want to turn on. So it effectively gives the government more choice and will drive the cost of power down.
And let's talk about organizations that have felt the need because of a lot of really the expenses around power to set up their own plants, solar or otherwise. Increasingly, we're seeing a lot of different companies setting up solar plants to be able to, create energy for their own consumption.
Sure.
But when they are not able to take these up fully, there's the opportunity to sell these on to the government. Do you think that same auction method would work for this kind of organizations?
So, I mean, one thing that Solar Century have been doing in Kenya for the last 3 years is building medium-scale plants, 1 megawatt or so,
Yes.
for private sector, for businesses. Like we're building 1 megawatt for a CP at the moment. We're about to start building another megawatt for London distillers. And this is a very, this doesn't require government intervention. This is a sort of, the private business taking the decision. The key is any excess. Can they submit excess to the grid? Yes. And what will they get paid for that excess? At the moment, the net metering policy is coming through government. We expect in the next year that to be formal policy. And when that does, for that specific sector in solar, I think we'll see a rapid acceleration of private businesses who take that option, knowing that if their demand is low or they don't work at weekends or a public holiday, they can sell to the grid.
For a lot of people, a lot of organizations in energy, part of the challenge is storage, because in Kenya, the peak hours tend to be similar to when they're also working at peak performance, and when they shut down, then performance consumption in other areas also goes down.
Sure.
What needs to happen so we can start matching this demand such that we then can say we spread it that to a 24-hour economy, or able to store the excess such that it can be released when it's peak consumption time
Sure.
again?
So I think you've touched on the key. I mean, the next stage of the power story is storage.
Yeah.
We've seen solar come down in price hugely over the years, largely due to the increase in supply, and we're seeing storage starting that sort of fall now.
Yeah.
And this is largely driven by people like Elon Musk investing in the gigawatt factory in the US. Right now, we've just built a large storage solution on the shores of Lake Victoria for a CP. This is sort of the largest storage solution at the moment in the country. So this is really the start of it.
What's their capacity?
This is 800 kilowatt hours. And in Western Kenya, the power supply is a little bit more irrational than it is in Nairobi.
In other parts, yes.
And so the storage will carry the business throughout the day. But yes, it's really the key moving forward. And over the next few years, we're going to see storage have a bigger part to play, where you can produce power, during the peak hours, for example, with solar, store it, and then use it, when everyone's gone home, and turn on their kettle and their TV and everything else.
Let's talk on something you just talked about. Elon Musk, African, then immigrated to Canada, then the US, will focus on solar energy. He has created entire cities that depend on solar grids and that sort of thing. What do we need to do to start borrowing some of these learnings, especially seeing that there has been so much resistance to even things like putting up solar water heaters in this part of the world? How do we start creating policy that will give a push or a pull for people to incentivize them to start doing the things that we are saying?
So, I mean, there's a lot of sort of answers to that question.
Yes.
But in terms of adoption, when solar power started in the UK, there was much more resistance from the utility than there was in Kenya.
Yes.
So I think we've been much quicker to adapt here with Kenya Power and the Ministry than other countries. What Elon Musk is pushing at the moment, electric cars, they'll come to Africa. They're already, sort of here, but not at the scale. In terms of his sort of larger scale solar ideas, there's innovative financing available for solar now.
Yeah.
A lot of the sort of private sector driven solar businesses, the ideas are here, and it's reaching sort of the price point that makes it work, and also just getting the policy right.
Yes.
It's a mature technology in an emerging market, and maybe some things haven't been right to date, but the path looking forward is very positive.
And to close, and very quickly, the fact that in some of those economies we've seen, even at the individual household level, abilities to sell back to the grid, that if you generate off your solar panels or your solar roof enough for your own consumption and the surplus, this then flows out to the grid, and it sort of balances out your electricity bill at the end of the month. Is that something we can see here?
I think with net metering coming in, it'll target smaller businesses, maybe large residential, where you can sort of send power to the grid and pull it back later. But if, we've seen it happen in Germany and UK. If that happens in Kenya, we're a very entrepreneurial people here. Yes. And if it happens, it's going to be a major drive for installing solar in Kenya.
Yes. Maybe some of the incentive we are talking about, people learning that they can make some money